let us start with the Ravens. We're going to grade the Ravens, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and defense. They've been on a tear this year, got the first round bye, actually have a game coming up this weekend against the Texans and CJ Stroud. Really excited to see how that plays out in general. And we'll start with the quarterback. All right, here are Dylan and I's grades. We will go through them and then go down the line. Lamar Jackson, I'm giving him an A, and I see you are as well. I'll let you kind of expand on this in a moment, Dylan. But benefit of having impact through the air, we've seen Lamar now clock a career best 3,600 passing yards, more of a run-first quarterback through the first couple years of his career, and now he goes out, throws for 3,600. The underrated aspect, I'll let you kind of talk about the versatility of his run game and everything. Underrated aspect that I love about Lamar, especially in this day and age where we're losing Hall of Famers and mediocre quarterback play is becoming more and more apparent, he takes care of the freaking football. Like 125 passing touchdowns to 45 interceptions. We have a 24-7 ratio this year. This guy does not turn the ball over. You don't have to worry about those -2 totals, and I'm really excited about him. So what else can you tell us about Lamar?
Yeah, the big points that I highlighted on Lamar is that he is that dual threat quarterback. So that rushing bonus is a huge upside, especially in the fantasy space. And then also is that this year he turned into more of that Russell Wilson build by throwing more. I was really shocked. And he even threw the ball well without Mark Andrews for half the year, which that really adds value now to not only go out there and not have your number one receiver or number one target, but to ball out while not having that number one target.
Well, it's interesting, right? You lose your primary weapon throughout the first few years of your career in Mark Andrews, and you have someone with this run-heavy instinct. You would think, surely Lamar's going to revert back and rush. Did he do that a decent amount? Sure, but he hit that career high for passing yards. We'll go on to the running backs. Interested to see what you have to say here. This is one of the biggest disputes you and I have. So B+ for me, C for you. I think in general, this team prevailed well. If we look at them from a big picture standpoint, overall, great running game. They averaged 4.9 yards per carry. Now, when you pull Lamar out of that data, 4.7, he obviously has a very positive impact getting out in the open field. Not as many design runs, more scramble drill elements for Lamar. The instability with injuries is where I guess you're probably going to get at this with this. J.K. Dobbins out for the year from the get-go. Gus Edwards, the most stable option. He was in for 17 games. Keaton Mitchell looked magical, but he only played 8 games and then tore his ACL, and that was one of the uglier injuries that I've seen this year. There's another one that will come with a later team. If you can guess it, congrats to you. We'll get to it in a moment. But yeah, in general, lots of instability, but I would say in general, we've got a very productive backfield in the Ravens. A C is not a great grade, so what do you not like about this?
Well, the productivity is very good with the backfield, and the whole reason I'm like down on the backfield is super fragile, like you highlighted. Having 2 backs go down throughout the year is not a good sign. But then also that Lamar rushing ability takes away from me wanting a Ravens running back. You have Lamar who's going to run the ball. You know that with him being that dual threat quarterback. And it just kind of takes away from that running back position.
That's fair. I mean, you could probably name on one hand the amount of people who tuck it and run the same amount or more than Lamar. Justin Fields comes to mind. Josh Allen with those cheat up the middle runs. Obviously, Jalen Hurts. And that honestly might be it. Like, Lamar's kind of in a tier of his own. So when you do look at the running backs and you look at the instability and all of a sudden we do have a healthy quarterback who's tucking it and running himself. I mean, we talk about game script all the time, right? If a team's up, they're going to run the ball. That doesn't mean they have to hand it off. They just have to run the ball to keep the clock going. So I like that point a lot. Definitely not a surefire number one primary answer in the backfield. It should have been Gus Edwards, but then again, it should have been J.K. Dobbins, and he got hurt for like the second or third time in his career, a season-ending injury from the get-go. Then it looked like it was going to be Keaton Mitchell. So if you're someone who can get away and kind of stream, week by week, go and play with the waiver wire and get your pick, I guess this is good for you. But are you going to be able to get the third Ravens running back in a row? And then you have to pray that they're actually productive because, like you said, Dylan, Lamar runs it a lot. We'll go to a very interesting category here. You're not going to see a whole lot of teams with the record that the Ravens have a D+ and a D in a certain category, but if there's a place where it's justified, I think it's here. I am giving the Ravens a D+ in their wide receiving core. There's definite improvement here. We had Hollywood Brown the first couple years of Lamar's career, and then he left the nest. but it's just Zay Flowers, 858 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. Odell was a nice surprise. He cleared 500 yards for the first time in a bit. But at the end of the day, the personnel of this offense, and this is kind of a theme with a lot of teams in the AFC North in general, it's run first. Although we have that unstable situation in the backfield, it's a lot of running. There's not a great prioritization of the receiving core, so D+ for me. What's your case for the D there?
Yeah, for the D, like you mentioned, Zay Flowers improved a lot. Not a bad option at wide receiver 1. Does that mean would I go out of my way and get him early on? No, by all means, no. The next receiver, it drops hard and it drops fast.
Yeah.
I mean, Odell's getting old and he's going to start to decline. We've already seen the decline happening, and there's just not a lot of depth at this position.
And it's like, right, you have somebody with the experience and the past success of Odell, and if you look at him on paper, you go, this is a very solid wide receiver too. But that's just it. It's the past. It is not the current. This guy's around the age of 30, and he's a couple of knee injuries in now. He had 2 in a little over 2 years, especially with the whole turf situation against the Rams, which feels like forever ago, but really it's only 2 years ago. You've got the element of surprise here, and all of a sudden, yeah, are we delightfully surprised that Odell cleared 500? Sure, but your wide receiver 2, more times than not, should have better numbers than that. So Dylan and I kind of align the same there. We go to the tight end position. We agree here. High productivity. We brought his name up a couple times already. Mark Andrews goes down. One thing we didn't expect was for Isaiah Likely to go up. We saw a little bit of Isaiah Likely towards the latter half of last year. Came in for a game or two and was a more prominent piece with Mark Andrews battling injury. Mark Andrews is getting older. These are things we have to talk about, right? Especially in Dynasty fantasy football, the longevity of a player. How realistic is it for us to rely on someone? But tight ends alone, I love the tight end room. You're not going to find a whole lot of tight end 2s on a team with the talent of Isaiah Likely. 5 touchdowns in the final 5 games of the regular season. And Lamar has relied on this tight end position a lot so far. You've got him at A- as well.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Andrews gets hurt. That doesn't stop Lamar from going to this position. It's no secret that Lamar just loves to go to tight ends. And me being a big believer in tight ends makes me high on this, because if you have a quarterback that goes to the tight end, he's going to find a way to get that tight end touches.
Right. In general, we've kind of seen Lamar have that tendency. Mark Andrews goes down and he didn't really waver. He didn't shove the ball to Zay Flowers a whole lot more. And especially Isaiah Likely, and we see this a lot with tight ends, that bigger stature, they're boxing out. He utilized them in the red zone, right? 1 touchdown per game for the last 5 games. Pretty good pace to be on. You are not going to see a lot of these in this series, but it applies here. A+ on both ends for the Ravens defense. Let's sit in and justify it. They were tied for defense number 1 in fantasy this season. When you look at a points per game perspective with the standard, it goes down as you give up more points. You get 2 points per turnover, 1 point per sack. The Ravens were all over it, and they forced the most turnovers in the league in 31. I've got an A+. What do you like about him?
Yeah, you hit it right on the nose with the fantasy. Tied for the most fantasy points from a defense. And then looking at it outside of a fantasy perspective, led the league by allowing only 16.5 points per game, the lowest amount of points allowed by any team.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that's just dominant, and the quickest way to lose points in fantasy is obviously touchdowns, but in general, scoring. If you're giving up a ton of points, obviously that's going to drop a lot, and you need the turnovers to make up for it. We get the best of both worlds with this Ravens team. They're forcing the most turnovers, and they're allowing the least amount of points. Kind of a no-brainer. And this Ravens team in general, there's just a ton to like. Again, we have the weak spot at the wide receiver spot, but that's just not how they operate. They run the ball a lot. They utilize their tight ends both in blocking situations and, of course, in the run as well, and just in the receiving end. But the defense is what this team hangs their hat on, and if there's somebody you can hold on to for an entire year, if there's a defense I would vouch you even draft in the second or third to last round, because some people leave those out and they just stream them. This team's worth it. The future's bright. Not a lot of contract issues going forward. They're young, especially on the defensive end of the ball. I like them a lot. I think there's a lot to look forward to with this Ravens squad.